In this episode, we talk about the trends that emerged from the BJP's first list of candidates. We also talk about the latest meeting that took place between the representatives of Ladakh and Union Home Minister Amit Shah. But first, we talk about the Supreme Court overturning its 1998 ruling, which said that members of the legislature cannot be criminally prosecuted if they accept bribes in relation to the way they vote or speak in the House. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In July of 1993, when P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister, CPIM's Ajoy Mukhopadhyay had introduced a no-confidence motion in the Lok Sabha against the ruling government. The Congress party had been 13 short of a majority, but on the day of the vote, the motion was defeated, and Rao and his government continued to stay in power. But a year later, it came to light that MPs of the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha had accepted massive bribes from Rao to vote against the no-confidence motion. Later, the CBI registered cases against 6 of these MPs. These charges were challenged and finally reached the Supreme Court, which in a historic ruling said that legislators cannot be criminally prosecuted for taking such bribes under Article 105(2) of the Constitution. Now, this article says that no member of Parliament shall be liable to any proceedings in any courtroom in respect of anything said or any vote given by him in Parliament or any committee thereof.
So Article 105 is what gives Parliament the immunity from prosecution.
That's Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath, who reports on law for the paper.
So, say in a case where a member of Parliament makes a speech in the Lok Sabha and he attacks the opposition. Now, the opposition member cannot sue the other member for defamation. That's the simplest way of understanding parliamentary privilege. So, what you say on the floor of the House cannot be held against you in a court of law. But the specific wording of 105, especially in Clause 2, it says that any speech or any vote given in Parliament thereof.
Any vote given in Parliament. So this is the provision that the Supreme Court in 1998 had to interpret. It had to interpret what a vote could mean in this context.
And the specific context of that judgment was, of course, if there has been an allegation of bribery involving a vote that has to be made in the Parliament, can the MP then be prosecuted? So a literal interpretation of the provision says that there is a blanket ban on any kind of prosecution. So in 1998, the majority of the court, it was a 5-judge bench ruling. So 3 judges from the majority who said that this is what it means, that even if there is an alleged case of bribery, parliamentarians cannot be booked in a criminal case for corruption.
Right, but Apurva, when we look at it, there is a big difference between saying something in Parliament against the opposition and, accepting bribes. So did the court not make a distinction between the two?
No, of course, there is a difference between, say, a defamation case and criminal case under the Prevention of Corruption Act. And the court recognizes it. Even in 1998, the question was specifically about initiating an FIR under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So the Supreme Court is very mindful that this is a corruption case. But a reading of the law itself doesn't seem to tell you that what cases can be exempt and what cases cannot be. It says any, and the word any means any. So the Supreme Court then goes with that, where do we draw the line? So if the Parliament can punish its members for its contempt, then it should just be the remit of Parliament. And these lines are important because these are essentially what gives the separation of powers. The Parliament's privileges and this immunity is distinct, and the court at that time thought this needed to be protected. And Shashank, at the end of the day, a criminal case is a criminal case, right? So it doesn't matter whether it is, say, for defamation or corruption. Again, that is the wisdom of the court at that date. And right after the 1998 judgment was passed, there have been many smaller judge bench rulings which struck a discordant note, which essentially not agreeing with that 5-judge bench ruling and said, but that's not what the framers of the Constitution would have intended. And this is what gave rise to the Supreme Court now going back and checking the correctness of the 1998 ruling.
Right, we're talking about this case because on Monday, a 7-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court overturned the 1998 ruling. So talk about why the Supreme Court made that decision.
So in Monday's ruling, the Supreme Court has a very clinical approach. First goes into interpretation of the text of 105 itself. And then it says, so this is essentially an interpretation of the Constitution. And the court says that you need to interpret this provision not in isolation by just reading 105, but by fitting it in the larger theme of what the Constitution framers envisage. And one clear aspect is that the framers of the Constitution envisaged probity in public life, right? They did not intend for corrupt lawmakers being shielded from the law. So that's where the Supreme Court essentially draws the line and says, we can't just interpret 105. We have to fit 105 in the larger context of the Constitution. Also, an alternate reading, which is what the 1998 ruling did, right? An alternate reading where you give lawmakers a blanket immunity that would create an arbitrary class of government servants who would not be punished for corruption. And that's sort of an impossible reading. So basically, that the other outcome is so bad that we can't do that. So let's go with what makes sense and what fits in the larger theme of the Constitution. That is the court's reading essentially.
And Apurva, when we talk about the immunity that lawmakers get, in this latest ruling, the Supreme Court looked at what is essential to their functioning and gave a verdict based on that. So could you talk about that aspect a bit?
Yeah. The idea of parliamentary privileges has a common law history. Why we have parliamentarians shielded from certain acts? Because it is essential to their functioning. Without the right of free speech, which is more than what you and I enjoy as ordinary citizens, parliamentarians cannot function. They cannot do their jobs. But can every privilege be claimed like that? And who is the judge of what is parliamentary privilege or not? So these are some of the questions the court tries to address. And here the court says that this question, what is a parliamentary privilege and who can afford it? That cannot be left only to the parliament. That the court is the final arbiter of that question. So in that context, the court says, how do we decide then what is an acceptable parliamentary privilege or what is not? So that will be based on a necessity test. That is, it has to be absolutely necessary for a lawmaker. Otherwise, she cannot function. She cannot do her job as an elected parliamentarian. That would be privilege and nothing else. So in that sense, the Supreme Court pushes the envelope, expands the scope of judicial review when it comes to parliamentary privilege. And we have to remember here that even the parliament has these sort of analogous responsibilities when it comes to the court. And that is where we talk about the separation of powers, right? For example, the parliament cannot discuss the conduct of a sitting judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court. You know, lawmakers cannot sit in judgment of what a sitting judge is doing in his judicial functioning in the parliament. So that's the line that the parliament has for the judiciary, and vice versa. The idea was that the judiciary should also have for the parliament. But now when it comes to issues like corruption, a criminal proceeding is a criminal proceeding. The Supreme Court says that it just cannot be enough that the parliament would hold someone in contempt and be done with it. There has to be a criminal proceeding when even a lawmaker is alleged to have taken a bribe.
And Apurva, with this ruling, do we see a change in the extent of powers that the judiciary has over the parliament?
So, of course, when it comes to the parliament, legislatively, the Supreme Court does have judicial review, right? Like, for example, when a law is passed, the Supreme Court is the final say on whether that law is constitutional or not. But for other actions in the parliament, increasingly you see the Supreme Court say that parliamentary privileges are not unfettered. They are not as if anything can pass under parliamentary privileges. For example, in Kerala, when in 2015, there was a protest in the parliament where some members of the LDF destroyed some of the furniture and mics in the state assembly. So when these MLAs faced criminal charges, they said that whatever they did on the floor of the house cannot be tried in a court of law because Article 105 Clause 2, or the similar provision for state assemblies, which is Article 194. But the Supreme Court in 2021 ruled that protection of immunity on the floor of the house only extends to speech. You can, of course, protest as well, but not by destroying public property. When you do something like that, then the course of criminal law will follow.
And next we talk about the BJP's first list of candidates for the upcoming Lok Sabha polls. This list, which was announced last week, includes candidates from Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, and Assam. Now, while the party has chosen to retain a number of candidates from the key states of Madhya Pradesh and UP, significant changes have been made in other states. In this segment, my colleague Niharika Nanda speaks to Indian Express's Vikas Pathak about these changes.
Vikas, what according to you are the biggest trends that emerged from BJP's first list of candidates?
Well, the list is in part conventional. So they have kind of declared 195 candidates straight away. And roughly maybe close to 80% of the list is a repeat of last time. So in states like UP, for instance, which is a big state, they have announced around 50 candidates. In that, they have generally stuck to what they did last time. So there are no very big surprises. What is more important, of course, is that they have decided to come out with the list pretty early, and that too, a large number of seats have been declared pretty early, which basically is perhaps having the first mover advantage, particularly vis-a-vis the Congress, because Samajwadi had declared some candidates, certainly Aam Aadmi Party had done, but Congress is yet to declare its candidate. So it's giving ample time to the candidate to interact with the voters. At the same time, it is also a sign of confidence and reassurance on the part of the BJP, because generally candidates are fielded late when you want to wait for the candidate of the other party to get known so that you can accordingly plan the caste combinations, the image of the candidate. But here the BJP seems to have, decided to go early, which basically also means that they believe that in many states the candidate is not going to matter at all. In a state like, say, Uttar Pradesh, for instance, or Madhya Pradesh, or Rajasthan, they perhaps believe that the candidate would not matter that much and the election will be contested on the face of Narendra Modi.
And Vikas, the other thing that stands out is that both in Delhi and in Chhattisgarh, the BJP has made some major changes. What do we understand are the reasons behind it?
Yeah, so when you look at Chhattisgarh, till now, the number of candidates that is retained is only 2 as of now, which means there's a major change that is happening in Chhattisgarh. Among the rest who have not been repeated, there are 2 kinds of patterns. One is the people who have been dropped, and the other could be people who contested the assembly elections and became MLAs. So in this case, for instance, Vishnu Dev Sai, the chief minister at present, he was member of parliament Lok Sabha. Then he was made to contest as MLA and he won, and he is now the CM. Similarly, Arun Saw, he also was member of parliament, and Renuka Singh. So 3 are not exactly replacements, but the seats had fallen vacant. That apart, the others are replacements. For instance, one example is that of Saroj Pandey, and Saroj Pandey has been fielded from Korba. And the reason for that, from what I hear, is that, that is an industrial belt. It has got a significant tribal population, but it's also an industrial belt, which is why many migrants from states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are there now. That population has increased. And Saroj Pandey is known to have had family connections in Bihar and UP. So perhaps they have that calculation in mind. So far as the tribals are concerned, well, the BJP has been behind the scenes somewhat close to Amit Jogi in the recent months. So they perhaps believe that maybe he could influence some tribal vote. That apart, sometimes it's like also increasing the chances of winning a seat. So there's an 8-time MLA and minister called Brij Mohan Agrawal, who has been fielded this time in Chhattisgarh. And he has been fielded while he has been an MLA, but he has been an extremely popular MLA who's been repeated over and over again. So fielding him would mean making the seat pretty strong for the Lok Sabha elections.
And do we have similar patterns in Delhi as well? The other place where we have seen major changes?
In Delhi, it's very difficult to put one's finger on why the changes happened. So, well, one possible scenario could be that there's an Aam Aadmi Party and Congress alliance. So the vote against the BJP might converge. So if the party felt that some candidates had become slightly unpopular or were not having a very good connect, then it was better to replace them to increase the chances of winnability. That is one thing. For instance, Bansuri Swaraj, from what I heard from the party, she's been very active and has had a very good connect with party workers. And she is daughter of Sushma Swaraj, whom the party workers knew. So that actually perhaps swung it in her favor because, the party apparatus would be very active in campaigning for her. So that might be one case. Now, in the other cases, well, Ramesh Bidhudi has not got the ticket this time. Parvesh Verma has not got the ticket this time. Now, one theory could be that Mr. Modi also does not want those who have been accused of rabble-rousing in the past to be repeated. So, if one goes by that hypothesis, one would say Ramesh Bidhudi, the controversy that happened in Parliament when he spoke objectionable things about Danish Ali, a matter that went to the Privileges Committee. Parvesh Verma also, the provocative sloganeering that happened, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So the thing is, that could be one hypothesis. But we are not very sure because, controversy has been there even regarding Sadhvi Niranjan Jyoti, who has been fielded. When there was a controversy about Parvesh Verma, at the same time, there was a controversy regarding Anurag Thakur, who is a union minister. So, well, I would say on the balance that winnability factors have been looked at, and Manoj Tiwari is the only one in the seats declared till now in Delhi who has been retained. All the others have been dropped. Dr. Harshvardhan, perhaps his pace was not in sync with the requirements of today's BJP. So initially he was taken off from the ministry. This time he has been taken off from the candidate list, and promptly a day later he posted on X that he would be retiring from politics and he would go back to the medical profession.
Okay, so after talking about Delhi and Chhattisgarh, let's come to Rajasthan. There we can see that half the seats have been conferred to new candidates. What did the party leaders say were the reasons behind that?
Now, again, as in the case of Chhattisgarh, partially looking at the image of a candidate, the kind of symbolism the candidate evokes, is he or she popular in the constituency? That is one ground on which, some candidates have been changed. And the other ground, as in Chhattisgarh, is that some of the MPs were made to contest MLA seats when the assembly election happened. And the ones who became MLAs, their seats fell vacant and now they are even ministers. So obviously they cannot be fielded again for Member of Parliament, and those seats need new people. Okay, in one of these seats, of course, in Alwar, we have got Bhupender Yadav, who has been fielded by the BJP. Alwar as a seat has got a significant Yadav population. Bhupender Yadav is also a Yadav by caste. So the caste combination, and of course, Bhupender Yadav is a central minister. He's close to the party leadership. So that seems to be a pretty safe seat for him, and he's been fielded there. In Churu, of course, there's also a lot of symbolism that they have done. They have replaced Rahul Kaswan, who was Member of Parliament last time, and they chose to field para-athlete Devendra Jhajaria. So Devendra Jhajaria brings a different kind of symbolism. He's an athlete and a para-athlete. At once, he's a well-known figure. It's also a kind of outreach to the disabled. At the same time, he also happens to be a Jat, and that seat has got a significant population of Jats. So these are the kinds of things that have happened in Rajasthan.
Right. And besides this, changes have been made in Assam based on poor performance of leaders. But Vikas, tell us, what does this list say about how the BJP has fielded candidates this time?
Well, it is very clear that I would say the speed with which the first list has come, it has beaten the Congress very clearly in terms of, announcing a significant number of candidates. So I would say, one, it is a very confident BJP going into the elections. And another thing, of course, in states like UP, for instance, where there might be doubts whether a particular candidate would be fielded. Now, this would be, some of the seats like Varun Gandhi's seat, Pilibhit, or the seat of Menaka Gandhi, which is Sultanpur. In seats like these, or, even I think Raebareli. Now, in these seats where the party has to think harder, perhaps, they have not yet decided the candidate because these might see some replacements. So, well, the seats that were sure shot have been decided in the states where the party is powerful. Some seats that might need some high profile replacement have not yet been decided. And states where the party is weak, they have decided the candidates early on, like Kerala, so that they get enough time to be campaigning. So in that sense, one, it is confident. Two, it wants to give candidates ample time. It is leaving some possible high-profile replacements for a later list. That apart, it is a combination of continuity and change. So there's plenty of continuity in it, but there is also some change in it.
And in the end, we talk about the ongoing protests in Ladakh and the latest meeting that took place between its representatives and Home Minister Amit Shah. For the past 4 years, the residents of Ladakh have been on protest, demanding special rights and safeguards for the Union Territory.
They started with simple shouts and murmurs about people not getting their due.
That's Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary, who reported on the story for the paper.
Or the centre not keeping its promises. Then it translated into some meetings with the central government by representatives of the Ladakh region. And finally, it has become a full-blown protest where people are on the streets in freezing weather and people are holding hunger strikes and all kinds of things are happening.
Now, the origins of these protests date back to the August 2019 decision, when the centre abrogated Article 370 and the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir was bifurcated into two union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh.
So the basic demands of the people is basically you give us back our statehood. If you cannot give us back our statehood, at least give us a legislature so that we have some representation of the people. And third most important and the biggest demand is inclusion of the region in the 6th schedule of the Constitution. So 6th schedule of the Constitution will provide some special provisions. There are some special provisions in that for certain regions in the country which are populated by tribals for the protection of their land, their jobs and their culture, and gives them an opportunity for self-governance. So there are these autonomous district councils which are created, which are totally administered by tribal people. They have their own budget and everything, and they have, certain powers to legislate also. And not all laws of the parliament are actually applicable to them, especially when it comes to, certain customary laws of the tribal people. So those protections are what they have been demanding, because they are saying that 97% of Ladakh is actually tribal. In fact, there has also been a recommendation for it by a government commission on this, that they should be included in the 6th schedule of the Constitution.
And Deeptiman, although these are the demands right now, Ladakh had actually been demanding the status of union territory for some time. So what was the reaction after the August 5th decision, and how did we see that changing?
So it was ecstatic when union territory status was given to it. But within a year, it realized that it is actually getting nothing out of it. And it has been at a loss. And there were fears that, with all the protections of 370, which were in Jammu and Kashmir and so applicable in Ladakh also. So the land in Ladakh belonged only to the local people. The jobs in Ladakh belonged only to the local people. Once Article 370 is removed, that protection is removed not just from Jammu and Kashmir, but also from Ladakh. And then they suddenly realized that, oh my God, now our jobs, our land, our resources are under threat. So that's how this entire thing started building up. Okay, and that is why the demand for legislature, demand for 6th schedule, because they want their jobs, they want their land, their environment, their ecology to remain protected, and most importantly, under their control, and not have say people from outside coming and, or large scale industrialization happening in that sensitive ecological zone. So they want to have a say in what kind of industrialization should happen, what can be done, and have a stake in the money that is generated out of that.
And Deeptiman, on Monday, a meeting took place between the representatives of the region and Union Home Minister Amit Shah. Could you talk about what we know about this meeting?
Yeah, so what we know is that the Home Minister has flatly refused that there will be any concession from the government on the demand of inclusion in 6th schedule. He has also said that there cannot be a separate state of Ladakh, and it is also unlikely that the UT will get a legislature. He has, however, expressed sympathy for the issues raised by the people, which was represented by the Leh apex body and the Kargil Democratic Front. And he has said that we will try to address the concerns of the people through other means. And these include inclusion of the region under Article 371. Basically, under Article 371, you can provide certain protections again to tribal people. And these protections are available to many states, as many as 11 states, in different forms. So, like in Maharashtra and Gujarat, you have Article 371 has provisions which allows the states to form, development bodies for certain backward regions, like Vidarbha or say Kutch in Gujarat. Similarly, but more importantly in the northeast, in states such as Nagaland and all, it basically bars Parliament from legislating on issues that concern the customary laws of the tribal people. So, unless the assembly of those states allow Parliament to do it, it will not be done. Similarly, transfer of land in Nagaland, in Mizoram and all is solely decided by the state, which is administered by tribal people. So again, they have the protection of land. Similarly, in jobs, almost 80% of jobs and all remain reserved for the tribal community there.
And all this happens under the special provisions of Article 371.
Absolutely. So Article 371 provides for such protections. And government has to bring an amendment and, insert a new clause. Like there are clauses from 371 to 371J. So, the government will have to bring another clause specially for Ladakh if it wishes to do it. What we have learned is that he has also promised that if you want, we can reserve 80% of jobs for Ladakhis. We can also empower the hill councils more, give them more powers. As far as representation is concerned, he said that concern can be met through, representation through hill councils. We can give you a budget which is as good as a state. So what else do you want?
And what was the reaction of the representatives to this idea, to this proposal?
The representatives have actually been demanding that these protections are okay, but, we need some representation. They say that the entire Ladakh administration has become too bureaucratic. It is run by LG and IAS officers, or Janta ki sunwai nahi hai, because these are not people who go to the ground. These are not people who keep in touch with the general public all the time.
What people call babus, basically.
Yes, what you call the babus. Babus are submerged in files. So they say that we need representation and we need some stake in the governance of our own region. So only if, there is a legislature that we can legislate our own laws. We are 97% tribal. So we should have some say shot at self-determination, self-governance. So that is missing, and there is complete frustration among the public because, bureaucracy can be a little apathetic because it is more given to following orders than listening to the general public. That's how it is structured. So they say that, there should be elections, at least give us a legislature. If you cannot give us a statehood, if there is a legislature, we'll have our own MLAs. Public voice will be raised in various manners. There are different sections of the society which need representation. So that is their main concern for which they are agitating.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and was produced by Niharika, Nanda and me, Shashank Bhargava. If you liked the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.